had left it a good few years before I decided it was time to talk about it. Being dyslexic, being gay, being a man. I applied to university and got rejected. I ended up going back to secondary school when I was 25, and then they rejected me again.
You've got like the best job in government, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology.
Why on earth can't we be the centre of the next industrial revolution?
We are going to slip, right?
I don't think we're going to slip. I want us to have Britain's first $1 trillion company. I want it to happen in this government. Everyone loves hearing the negatives about government, but it is the most amazing platform for getting things done. And when you get things done and you get things right, you can make such an impact. Well, I grew up in Bognor Regis, and there was a chicken farm down the road. We'd be walking down collecting them, and one of the other kids that was collecting, because it would throw an egg over the top, and they've been doing it for months, and they were all like very good aims, and one would just land on your head.
We're training for a politician being hit by eggs.
I hadn't thought of that. I honestly hadn't thought of that.
Make sure you subscribe so we can continue to get bigger and bigger guests. Peter, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the last time we saw each other, we were in even more salubrious surroundings than this. We were at the King's Awards for Enterprise, which obviously sort of celebrates the best of British business, at Windsor Castle. What stands out for you on evenings like that?
Well, just the sheer breadth of talent and where it comes from. The great thing about that was just walking around. I met people from the Northeast. You meet people from all parts of the country, and they're all totally thrilled to bits to be there.
Yeah.
And it was just lovely. And I met businesses who were really small, very community-based, but doing extraordinary things. And I'm always aware that right now, up and down the country, there are people who are doing things in a new way. They're doing things that are genuinely impactful for people's lives and creating wealth for people who never thought they would have wealth. And they must feel overlooked. And they must feel that they're just doing it, going home, and nobody notices. So moments like that is a time when you can say, you are noticed, and you are really respected. And look, you're standing in the room with the King.
Yeah.
You've got Secretaries of State here, and we're all here for you. We have bent our diaries for you.
Yeah.
And just that moment, it means more than I think people realise, those sorts of events.
Those moments to kind of take stock and appreciate it. Were there any particular companies you met? Because I'm always, even though it's not just for small businesses, I'm always quite taken by, there are a lot of businesses that you won't have heard of that are small and medium-sized enterprises from right across the country. Bigger businesses can still apply for it, but they tend to be few and far between. Were there any that particularly stood out?
There were three guys who all came from the same town, and they all did different. One was a tool maker, and one of them it was all quite sort of manufacturing based.
Yeah.
And they all knew of each other, but didn't really know each other. But they'd all found out that the three of them had won these awards, and they travelled down together. Nice. And I just assumed they were from the same company, because by the time I'd walked over to them in the hall, they were sort of laughing, and they looked like they were old friends. But that's what those things are for. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's a really special evening. And the King said to me, he said, "Jimmy, I've got a job for you. You need to promote these awards more." So
there we go.
I've done my bit. I was like, good one.
There we go.
I'm interviewing Peter next week, so there we are. You've been very open about your dyslexia, and it's something that I found when I was in government. One of my reflections on it was that it wasn't very well set up for me as dyslexic, like lots of writing briefs, lots of that type of thing. And that's not the way that I kind of learn, and it's not the best way that I kind of communicate at all. How have you found being in government for the last year and having dyslexia?
I have been open about it, but I chose to speak about it at the time I was comfortable speaking about it. It wasn't when I'd just come in as an MP. I had left it a good few years before I decided it was time to talk about it. Being dyslexic, being gay, being a man, we have multiple characteristics that make us the people we are. And I think it's important, and it's certainly important for me, that you reveal and talk about those characteristics on your own terms, in your own way, because it's so central to who you are. But when you're in public life, I do think that there's an onus to share with people what makes you tick. I think it's important for people to see what makes you who you are, because that contributes to who you are as a public figure. and makes you more accessible. But if you have a characteristic which is a barrier in life as well, and has been a challenge in life, I feel the added need to share that in a way that other people at different points in their lives and careers may be slightly overcome by it, and knowing that somebody else is sort of succeeding in a different way or in any way might well help them. So I did speak about it openly and spoke about what it was like as a child growing up with it, me discovering I had it, and then life with it afterwards. In this job, I'm very fortunate because as a Secretary of State, you have a big private office, and which means you have lots of secretaries there who are there to filter up the workload from the different corners, all corners of the department, and present it to you in a way that gets the decisions the department needs, but also to look out for me as an individual at work and as a Secretary of State. The challenge has been for them to understand me and me to communicate to them how it is, and it is very difficult because it expresses itself in different ways, and it's not intuitive. Dyslexia isn't intuitive, and it's different for different people. And I'm learning the job at the same time as trying to learn it with specific learning characteristics.
Yes.
I'm also auditorily dyslexic as well, so the idea that things can just be read to me to make it easy isn't always the solution. So, but one of the things I did learn when I was a child, before I even knew I had dyslexia, is that I always had to work harder than other people to achieve the same. And the same is true now. I just had to find a way of doing it where the department gets out of me what it needs, and I do it on my terms, in my way, and still have a semblance of a life as well, when every now and then at least friends and family can see me and I can do things like do a bit of exercise and things that actually just clear your mind and actually contribute to you being more resilient and better at the job as well. So there's a lot of diversity in how I consume information. A lot of it is discursive. I will take home the packs of work. Sometimes I'll allocate work time during the day when I will just sit in silence and not be disturbed, so I can just rattle through some of the reading that I have. And you have to read very quick summaries of things that are going on. Sometimes you have to read policy documents that are very large. So I now have to just find the best ways of doing it in each day.
And also, it's like, it is a very technical brief, probably the most technical, right? So, like, how do you try and interpret these scientific methods and so on? I mean, I remember hearing that you have been using AI a bit to kind of like talk you through it.
Yeah, so I would describe this job as you have layer upon layer of knowledge. When you first come into the job, of course, the department that I'm responsible for has a space sector. It has broadband, gigabit, it has 5G rollout, the physical infrastructure. I'm growing the AI infrastructure, so the data infrastructure for the country. I'm also responsible for the research side of higher education, all R&D for the country, so the pharmaceuticals and life sciences side of research, and then all tech, and some critical technologies like quantum and AI and others, including all of the regulation that goes with online activity. So it's a very, very broad brief, and all areas of that are very, very technical. So my advice to people going into jobs where there's a steep learning curve is don't try and consume it all at once, but get the foundational knowledge you need to start with, and don't panic that you haven't gone home knowing everything, and don't panic that you have to know everything so that you can give the decisions that people need, because you have to rely on people to make those decisions at the beginning, and over time you rely on them less and less, because layer upon layer you get sort of layers of sediment of knowledge that just builds up that you can draw on at any point. So the experience you have as being a Secretary of State, I'm a much better Secretary of State, I believe, on my terms than I was 2 months ago. Definitely 6 months ago, and almost certainly than when I first came in. And my ability to now place knowledge and know what I don't know in order to get that knowledge to make the decision that's been asked of me, I'm just much more proficient at now. And that comes with being quite self-aware, which might well be linked to me overcoming barriers to learning in the past, which is one of the characteristics that may have sprung from that. But it's also work ethic and just making sure you
I was just about to say, I don't think I've heard a cabinet minister talk about it like that in that way before, and then you use the word, I'm quite self-aware, and I thought, oh well, maybe.
Well, personally, with my learning, I am. Yeah.
And tell us about your first job, because that was quite formative.
Do you mean my first full-time job at the Body Shop's head office? Yeah, because my first job was I think back then, I don't actually know what the age is now. It was 13 back then when you could first earn money.
Yeah.
And on my 13th birthday, I got the job. So I've worked every...
So what did you do at your 13th birthday?
I was collecting eggs in a battery chicken farm.
Okay.
Well, I grew up in Bognor Regis, and there was a chicken farm down the road. It's free range now, and I go back there, but back then it certainly wasn't.
How much were you paid for that?
I can't remember, but it must have been like 50p for a whole bunch of these big trays of eggs, but it was awful. And you'd be walking down collecting them, and one of the other kids that was collecting, because it was all kids doing this, used to throw an egg over the top, and they've been doing it for months, and they were all like very good aims, and one would just land on your head from the other side of the aisle and stuff. So by the time you got home...
Quite good training for a politician, being hit by eggs.
I hadn't thought of that. I honestly hadn't thought of that. Anyway, but when I got home, my mum always used to make me stand there in my pants and hose me down because I was just such a mess and it stank so much. But anyway, it was work, and I loved work, and I loved the money. And even before that, before I was 13, I once went on the beach, because I grew up, as I say, in Bognor Regis, and we'd come back from a holiday somewhere, and there was somebody who was selling ice cream on the beach. So I went with my mum and to Sainsbury's and got a big tub of ice cream and cones, and I walked along the beach selling that. I must have been, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 when I was doing that.
Oh, that's quite entrepreneurial.
But my first job that you're referring to is when I got to work at the Body Shop's head office, and I'd left school with no qualifications. And so I know usable qualifications. I did get them, but they were all like U's and whatever they were, the sort of the failure ones. And I applied for these jobs and was always very socially aware, and I was getting offered jobs, and on the day one I would go in and just say this isn't for me and leave.
Right, okay.
And my mum just went, for God's sake, find a company you want to work for and get a job there. And the Body Shop's head office was just down the road in Littlehampton. This is 1989, I was 18. The Body Shop was going through the roof. It was, Anita was becoming an icon of social change and campaigning and business success. And I applied for a job and got rejected. In the end, I applied for so many jobs, I went and sat in reception there until somebody came out and interviewed me, and in the afternoon. And then when I got home, there was a message on the answer phone saying you've got a job in the accounts department in the purchase ledger. So matching goods that have come in past quality control with the invoices, and then authorising it to be paid, putting it into this very arcane mainframe computer.
Yeah.
I was useless at it, because look at the job and look at what my brain is good and not good at. It was just the worst thing imaginable. But I loved the company so much.
Yeah.
I was so inspired by Anita Rodic, even though I didn't meet her for quite a long time. And I was so determined to succeed in the company that I used to go in secretly at weekends on a Sunday and then just work and work and work and work so that nobody knew that I was struggling to keep up with the volume of work that was there. And I didn't know what was going on in my brain. I knew I loved the company. I just knew I couldn't do that sort of work very well.
Yeah.
And then that's how I met Anita Rodic, because she was the only other person that used to come in on a Sunday. And every now and then I saw her zip down the end of the office and up to her office. And then one week she spotted me and came over and started talking to me. And then I had suddenly this force of nature trying to sort of beat me into shape and push me out of my comfort zone. And I was terrified all the time. She was making me go out and do public speaking when I was a teenager. And they were expecting the highest paid person in the company, who's a global icon, and they used to get this scruffy, long-haired, unqualified, lowest paid person in the whole company turning up to speak to them. She was amazing.
And she encouraged you to kind of like apply for university as well, because was there a period at like 18, 19, were you aware you were dyslexic then?
No.
Or, I mean, were you worried then about like, you weren't fitting into the academic hierarchy and so on?
Well, there was no academic hierarchy for me, and I grew up in a really loving family. Who, my dad left school at 14 to become an apprentice stonemason to his dad in Liverpool. He went to the Navy at 16. He left school he left the Navy in his mid-20s to become a door-to-door salesman. Then he moved south and worked his way up this company and ended up buying and owning the company. And his work ethic was incredible, incredible. And I've inherited his work ethic, but I've also got the middle class sensibilities he worked so hard to give me.
Yeah.
And so, but he didn't go to university. He's not alive now. When he's heard me talk about this in the past, he was a bit upset because he thought I was talking down to the fact that he didn't have any qualifications and didn't go to university, and that I was the first Kyle to get an A-level and go to university, get a degree, and then a doctorate, and then all this stuff. But when he said that to me, I was crushed because I was saying it in admiration of him. Real, genuine pride and admiration in what he achieved. And so, but university was never ever mentioned to me. No adult in school obviously would mention university to me. At home, it wasn't part of the vocabulary of our family. So when Anita Rodic mentioned it to me when I was 25, by which time I'd been an aid worker for a good few years, working with a project that she had set up, it was a bolt out of the blue. And for me, it was a leap into the unknown. And now, one of the reasons I'm so motivated in politics is that for young people from all backgrounds should be comfortable wherever they go. And the experiences you get growing up should be introducing people to lots of different places and people and backgrounds and social settings, so that not just so that we're encouraging kids to go down a certain path, but if they choose a certain path and you come from any background, it shouldn't be a leap into the unknown. And that's something that I've always got comfortable with, doing these leaps into the unknown, and quite enjoy it now, which is unusual.
Well, that's a good way of being. But I think it's interesting going to university. I often say to people, if they're not sure, going actually when you're a bit later in your 20s is quite a good thing to do, because you did geography and development and economics, and that is something that, well, it's taken me a long time to realise, but actually I'm really passionate about. If I were to go and do a master's now, it'd be in that, I think. Right? I'm not so much on the international side, more actually at home and how we kind of like develop our cities and so on. I find it fascinating, but that's taken me years to kind of realise you're kind of interested in all that stuff. And often I think we're asking almost 17-year-olds, right, to be making applications to university. It's just we're asking people to go quite deep, quite early on in their kind of careers about that. So I think your story is kind of really interesting. What's the one thing that people should know about geography and development, PhD?
Oh God, well, the PhD. I wouldn't wish a PhD on my worst enemy.
My wife's just finished it.
But well, there you are. And I think when you get a knighthood, if it's very very sexist this, but if you get a knighthood, your partner gets called lady.
Lady, yeah.
I think if you get a doctorate, your partner should get a title as well for what you put people through, your families through, your partner, your friendships is amazing. And I knew I had the barriers by then, the challenges by then.
Yeah.
But you make a really interesting point. I am the biggest defender of universities. I hate it when people talk down university education. But it is completely correct to say that every young person has got to find their own pathway through education into the work, which is right for them and what they want and is suited to the potential that they have and the potential they're exploring. Having said that, I don't think there shouldn't just be a conveyor belt into university simply because you come from a family where everyone went to university, therefore you should do it. I think it has to be the result of a thoughtful process, and one where you do actually really understand what learning characteristics you have, what potential and talents you have, and sometimes that's not always just expressed in the obvious way. And for some people, not everyone, but for some people, going into the workplace and coming to university a bit later is entirely the right thing to do. And of course I learned this the hard way. I mean, Anita suggested I go to university. I applied to university and got rejected. I ended up going back to secondary school when I was 25 and sitting in a classroom with 16-year-olds for a whole year to get the qualifications that the university had asked for. And then they rejected me again. I mean, I got into university because Anita Rodic called the university and said that she would return the honorary doctorate, her honorary doctorate, unless they had Peter Kyle as a student. And then, of course, I get in. This world opens up. I found it genuinely exhilarating. I found it energizing, exciting. It was just thrilling to be around so many people who just knew so much.
Yeah.
And then I loved the social side as well. I love the sporting. I've never been team sporty. I don't want to make myself out to be that, but I love the gym side of it, and I love the sheer freedom of it. But I've been in a disciplined work environment for 6, maybe 7 years before then. So I had the discipline that I went into university with.
Yes.
So I could explore all of that and still be really disciplined. I was going to seminars on courses that I wasn't studying because they were interesting, and I was just consuming it all. So when the university asked if I would stay and do a doctorate, it was the funniest thing in the world for me, because they'd spent so much time trying to stop me getting in.
Yeah.
That they were then trying to stop me leaving. So it was, I was very aware of all of this, and this was the moment that I started to discover a political purpose.
Yeah.
Because nobody in that university said, we shouldn't have Peter Khan as a student, he's not one of us. But the system itself was very, very good at just diverting people like me who don't have the instinctive vocabulary, background, pathway into university education away. This was 1996, so 14% of school leavers were going to university then. So the system was very good at diverting people like me away. I still don't to this day know why I persisted so much, but that persistence has stood me in very good stead, because it's the theme of my career.
What is it that makes you angry? Because one of the things, like speaking to people in advance of this, both sides of the aisle and so on, you have a fabulous reputation of getting on with people, all of that. And I was just like, I could barely get anyone to say a bad word about you anywhere.
Even your dad?
Yeah, even my dad. But like, what sort of makes Peter Carl angry? Like, what does fire you up?
It's very, very rare for me to be angry. Probably the only thing that really gets under my skin is people who don't make an argument, but they get personal. They make a personal attack, and social media is the worst at this.
Yeah.
And you see sneering, and so it's when I love engaging with people that I disagree with. I mean, it's where's the interest in sitting in a group of people you just all agree with?
Yeah. And
where's the learning in that? So, even on my own side, I enjoy that experience. But it's very, very rare for me to get angry. I'll get frustrated. I think any dyslexic will understand the real inner frustration of trying to get something off the page or something, and you're at that moment you can't quite get that word in or whatever, or sheet of paper just suddenly goes a bit blurry in your mind and things, and that you get that flicker of real frustration. But in terms of making me angry, very, very rare. I don't think many people have ever seen me truly angry.
But it was just interesting when you were saying that, sort of like it was the university sort of like, sort of almost slightly funneling you off to the side and so on. And I just thought that was it's interesting, because it often is those things that happen early on in our careers which sort of end up being the formative things that we look kind of back on, right? That sort of.
It is. As I say, I still don't quite understand why I persisted to the degree I did, but it's again one of these things that gave me political purpose, because I accept that most young people accept no for the first time they hear it, and they act on that no. For me, I just didn't, and I never have. But I've been hearing it all my life in different ways, and so when it got to the point where I wanted to stand for an MP, I'd been offered when I was in my 30s. When I say offered, I'd worked as a policy special advisor, and the party suggested that I stood, and I didn't feel ready for it. I didn't feel personally ready for it. There are other things I wanted to deal with in my life and get skills in my life before I even thought about it, even though by then I had a political purpose. But when I did want to stand, I was called and said, you shouldn't stand in Hove, which is where I lived. You should stand, they suggested somewhere, because Hove's a Tory seat.
Yes.
And go and stand in the safe Labour seat, because we think you'd be a good MP and we'd like you in there and have a solid seat. And I just said, I just want to stand in the place I really love, and I love living And I think it would be, for me, it would be dishonest to stand somewhere else. And I think I would lose some of the love of the job. Anyway, this person said, but you're going to lose. You shouldn't do it. And I just thought, oh God, how many times have I heard that in my life?
Yeah.
So of course I do it. And you just figure out what it takes to win.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like, I did what it took to get to university. Once I'd reconciled myself to it, that included going back to secondary school when I was 25. Now, when you look at a seat like Hove, which is a Tory seat, in an election cycle where I knew from the outset we were going to lose the overall election. So the exam question I had at the beginning was, how do you win a local election campaign in a general election campaign that your party is going to lose? And that was written on the top of a bit of paper. And I got together a whole group of people, so somebody got together a group of people who were all very experienced to help me answer that question. And that I did to the letter for the whole campaign.
Yeah.
So, the question isn't you're going to lose or you're going to be denied or you shouldn't even attempt, because in normal circumstances with normal people, that's what happens. The question is always, what will it take to succeed and for you to be the person that either drives it, delivers it, or achieves it?
Makes it happen. And what is that number one thing, right? Because it not only did you turn the seat, it's now a 20,000 majority as well, too modest to say, but what is it that sort of like you were able to do in a down cycle for the Labour Party at that point?
Well, one of the things was that and incidentally, when you say what will it take to achieve something, if you just write down and decide what it takes to achieve something, at least you can make a decision whether you do it or not. If you think, actually, I haven't got it in me to do that, or I don't want to put the effort in to do that, fine. But make a decision based on what you know it will actually take to achieve it. So in that particular campaign, there was a series of things that I had to do. The group that I trusted, who I knew would tell me the truth and never, ever tell me what I wanted to hear, came to the conclusion that I'm pretty good with people.
Yeah.
Therefore, if that is an asset, I've got to meet a certain number of people face to face. And it literally came down to, you must meet this number of people every single day between now and the general election to get to a certain number of people. And it was tens of thousands of people that I had to meet. So that was first thing, just me being as visible and engaging personally. And then it was finding a way, which I still think is one of the most challenging things about being an individual politician, whether you're a candidate or in office, is that people engage with you in so many different ways. They will see you in the street and they'll come and chat to you. They'll see you on the doorstep and chat with you. They'll see you in a public environment where you are speaking and projecting to groups of people. They're going to see you on TV and listen to you on the radio. They're going to see you on social media, but not just social media. There's lots of different types of social media out there. And they're going to see you ultimately in the House of Commons. So are you the same person in each of those? Because if you're a different person that you meet in the street to the person they see on social media to a different person that they see in a TV debate, then you're not authentic.
Yes.
And everything goes, and you just become, in their eyes, just like everyone else. And that, I think, is the hardest thing. And there are times I feel I've let people down, because sometimes I have been wound up in a TV debate and I've said something intolerant or whatever, which isn't who I aspire to be. And I think, goodness, people who are back home who have met me in the street, or, they'll see a different me, and it's not the me that I want to be. So I think in politics, being that person and finding a way of expressing the essence of who you are through so many different vehicles is a really tough thing. And that is why I had decided not to go into politics young and early. And when they offered me to go into a safe seat in my 30s, I said no, because there was still a lot about me I needed to discover and be comfortable with. So I think the more you really, really know yourself in politics, the easier it is to project who you are and be comfortable doing it without having to think all the time before you speak.
If you like what Peter Carl has to say about deep tech and science, you'll probably like this quick word from our partner, BGF. BGF is one of the UK and Ireland's most active growth investors, backing the breakthrough innovations shaping our future. BGF has committed 500 million over the next 5 years to early stage deep tech and life sciences. From advanced materials and semiconductors to medtech diagnostics and drug discovery, is part of a wider £3 billion pledge to support ambitious founders building the industries and jobs of the future. The early stage team invests between 3 and 10 million, from late seed to Series B, combining technical expertise, commercial insight and patient capital to help bold ideas scale globally. Since 2019, BGF has deployed over 280 million into early stage innovation. Portfolio companies include Organox, Cambridge GaN Devices, Echion Technologies and Tidal Sense. Pioneers transforming sectors from organ transplantation to ultrafast charging and respiratory diagnostics. With teams in London, Cambridge and across the UK, BGF is uniquely positioned to help science and technology nationwide, supporting the UK's ambition to become a global innovation superpower. Learn more at bgf.co.uk. I think that's true. I also think you came in at an interesting moment of where I heard Miliband talking about this the other day, which was like, you know, the end of the sort of new Labour era of command and control and message is discipline, discipline is message, all of that. And then that sort of moment in 2016 where it flips to authenticity. You sort of came in that window there of when it was changing. And he was pretty open about like saying he didn't quite get it right at all. And so was also a young leader. But the thing I would say is when I went through the list of new Labour MPs the other day, I was struck by how many are in their 30s. Like, it's a young bunch, right? Like, and I know you need the energy of that, but yeah, I was, because at the beginning I was like, oh, they're younger than me, and then by the end I was like, oh, that's rare, there's one that's older than me.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty extraordinary. But anyway, let's talk about the job, because I think you've got like the best job in government, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. But I was thinking about it, and you've got this quite tricky sort of triangle, I think, to kind of marry up, which is where you're going to be the biggest customer of sort of technology, like in terms of you're going to be making a lot of the purchasing decisions, you talk about the infrastructure. You need to be tech's kind of biggest promoter as well, with the challenges that comes. But then also you're the sort of biggest regulator or overseeing of the regulator as well. So it's this quite sort of tricky triangle that you have that you've kind of got to do. How do you approach the job?
Yeah, it's not unique. The same circumstances are there for most, not all, but many government departments. Health, for example, there's a lot of regulation in health, and also there's a lot of private sector engagement in health, even though it's not, even if it's not privately owned. We are commissioning from the private sector a lot, but there's a very particular debate around the role of big technology, in particular in Britain, and we have a sector press, a sort of the press, the media that scrutinises technology seems to be quite cynical about technology itself, and it's quite difficult. I found it quite difficult to reflect excitement about what I believe technology can do for our country, and have that interpreted as a genuine excitement for what I believe our country can and should be achieving, and what it means for everyone from every background, and the sort of progressive nature of technology if we get it right and use the agency we have as a government, without it being seen as being in the pocket of big tech and all those things. So again, we are a sophisticated society and economy, and we're a sophisticated government. Our regulators are fully independent. I do not control any of the regulators, but I do pass the laws which sets the frameworks that regulators adhere to, and that's all public. When it comes to the relationships with the tech companies, I mean, I make no procurement decisions as Secretary of State, but what I do is set the overall areas that I want technology to be involved in our society on behalf of government. And if that involves contracting to a company, then that comes out of my hands and goes to my department. And I understand that that there is an opaqueness to that in the eyes of the public, but I think that isn't what I would worry about. That's what from my perspective, I don't think the public should worry about that, even though I know there's a lot of scrutiny on it. I think that the real question that I grapple with is that when you have global companies which are innovating on a scale that the British state cannot match, what is the relationship you have with them which delivers the most for British people?
Yeah.
And how do we do so in a way that retains the agency that the state has on behalf of citizens to keep them safe and look out for their best interests whilst shaping that relationship? I'll give you a couple of examples. Amazon spends almost double on R&D than the entire British state does. And they're spending it on singular purposes for technological development, like the space program and some of the other commercial activities they do, and cloud computing. We're spending it on everything.
Yeah.
You know, we're funding the entire research sector in higher education, and we're doing life sciences investment. We're doing right across the board. So when they are investing that much, it is no surprise that they come up with solutions that we are not capable of doing as a state. So therefore, it would be absurd for us not to engage with that technology and put it to use for Britain. And therefore, we have different tools. I will legislate where needed. I will regulate where there is the need to put a floor reassurance for people about standards and about safety and about these matters. But there is another thing that government has the power to do, and that is statecraft. And statecraft will never replace legislation and regulation and the laws that we can pass. But the kind of relationships we're talking about here, and the scale and influence of these companies, we should be deploying statecraft. And what do I mean by statecraft? Building relationships, sometimes personal relationships, but these are relationships which are on behalf of government. I am acting as a Secretary of State, as they are acting as a Chief Executive or a Chief Investment Officer or one of these positions. And we are negotiating on behalf of two organisations, mine, the British state, theirs, their organisation. But you treat them with the respect for which they are entitled as achieving astonishing levels of commercial success and innovation. But negotiating, building relationships, using those relationships to sell the best of Britain, to deliver for Britain, but never ever putting to one side the standards and safeties and other responsibilities we have on behalf of the country. So in some regards, we are deploying statecraft to private organisations that we have traditionally in the past reserved for state-to-state relationships. But that is just reflecting the world that we're living in. And it is not disempowering or a sign of disempowerment for our country. It is actually a sign of an empowered country that is acting with confidence and using all the tools that it has and recognising the world as we actually find it, not the world that we have, because we cannot any longer control certain aspects of global life just by sitting in Whitehall, Brussels or Washington and passing laws anymore. We have to engage, listen, learn and make the argument, and that's what I'm aspiring to do.
And what has excited you most that you've seen? Because you must get to see some great things. What sort of, this is a media outlet that is positive about technology, generally speaking, so you can be more open and excited here. What have you seen that's kind of...
It's getting things done. I mean, everyone loves hearing the negatives about government, about the challenges of sort of cultural inertia and the caution of government and all these things. All of that exists. But it is the most amazing platform for getting things done. And when you get things done and you get things right, you can make such an impact. And so there's lots of things I could talk about, policies. The AI Opportunities Action Plan, I think, will be profound for the future of our country because it's about infrastructure and it's about skills. And
coming on to AI, don't worry.
So, but the thing that I think that gave me the most amount of personal satisfaction was something I learnt a lot from, that I think was my best example of leading my department and also doing something that in government that reflected life outside. And that was the announcement and the creation of the Digital Centre of Government. So What that means technically is that when we came in, I consolidated digital services from across government into one powerful digital centre. So units came across from government, and we have a big, powerful digital centre of government. In the first week I came in, I asked what it would take to have an app, a government app, and then a digital driving licence. They came back and said that it couldn't be done within the first 5 years. The digital driving licence would take more than 5 years. I said that is astonishing to hear, because I'm sure the companies that we all know as household names aren't waiting 5 years to design an app. Then they came back to me a few weeks, well actually it was about a week later, with a timeline that I'd asked for, and it came down to 3 years. Well, the gov.uk app is going to land this month in June. It's going to be followed very shortly afterwards with an AI-powered chatbot that will give intuitive, conversational experiences and access to information for all government data, sort of information, more than 700,000 pages of information. Then we'll have the digital wallet going into it with the digital veterans card to start with. And by the end of this year, we'll have the digital driving licence with the full online and offline facilities you expect from the driving licence, including the age verification digital ID system. And I launched it. The other thing I did that's counterintuitive was just before Christmas. We were coming up to launch it in January, and I said to the team, government just waits till everything's ready, and you keep it secret, and then suddenly, boom, you land it when everything is ready to land. And I said, but out there, in the world that we represent, which is tech, they have these keynotes and they have these meetings, and they announce these products and services that their consumers and customers and users can expect from them in the coming year. Why don't we do that as a government? Why don't we just tell the public what we're working on and get them excited about it, get them used to it before it lands? And no one said no. So I then said, and I think I should just announce it on a stage wearing jeans and a T-shirt, just so you look normal. No one said no. There was a sort of, there were eyes darting around, but no one tried to stop me doing it. So in January, and the other thing I did was I did it in Whitechapel, which is the building where we have the digital centre. 1,000 data programmers, engineers, and people with programming experience and deploying experience. And we built a stage there, and we had all the media there into the department. And then once all the media was there and the guests and stakeholders were there, all of the engineers and the staff from Whitechapel came in and crowded around the outside. And then I just got on stage and I had a demo of the app, and I just celebrated the work they were doing, and I announced everything I've just described, just said, pre-announced government stuff that's happening this year, completely unusually. And then I got the chance to say, and this is thanks to everyone who's standing around the back of this room. You know, they didn't believe that they could do this, and now here it is, and they have. And you just feel the electricity in the department, and you could feel the real sense of pride that they had done something that previously they had been told they couldn't and believed they couldn't do, and here they were doing it. Now, this is the sort of stuff that you experience very often out there in the private sector. That sense of real excitement, pace, innovation, lack of fear of getting things wrong and making mistakes, and then getting up there and just celebrating their achievements, and as the Secretary of State being able to point to them and share that achievement with them was just an amazing moment.
And as you say, sort of executing on it. Where do you think that sort of, and when you're saying that, and I remember conversations in government being like that, well, we can't do this for 4 or 5 years, and particularly as we are at this moment in history where AI is changing so fast, it just feels like a sort of a bonkers kind of statement. But where do you think that AI development might be by the end of this Parliament?
That's a great question, because I think by the end of this Parliament we're going to be knocking on artificial general intelligence. I think in certain areas it will have been achieved, whether it's sort of universally accepted and felt by everyone, I don't know, but we will be there. I think by the end of this Parliament, then its impact on workplaces will be known and felt. And these are things that we are thinking about very deeply in my department and this government, about what those impacts could and might be and how we prepare for that moment.
And what do you think it will be? Because I think it's such a big moment, right, to be there by the end of this Parliament. And sometimes I don't think Westminster's quite got its head kind of wrapped round like what we're arguably talking about a fundamental change to our economic model with this, right?
I think it will lead to a fundamental change in our economic model in terms of wealth creation and the concentrations of wealth. If you look at Klama, for example, which is one of the outliers in this country, you've seen the wealth generated per employee go up by probably 40%. And yet they've reduced their headcount directly because of AI, and yet they have re-employed some other people. So it's not a straight line. It's a pathway which has lots of twists and turns in it. But that's why I'm so determined that we train our workforce now. I've set up an apprenticeship, a digital apprenticeship within the civil service, so that people can start to get the skills they want internally if they want, because 1 in 10 jobs in the civil service by 2030 will be digitally orientated. I believe that will be the same for the broader economy. So we're in the process of doing Cyber First programs. That'll be 1 million students trained in AI. I've got 7.5 million people across the whole economy that we're now going to start the process of training. We're not talking about night school for 3 months here. You can have quite short, sharp training sessions that can unlock enormous amounts of understanding of AI and the ability to harness AI. Because the great thing about AI is it's an amazing tutor. So just as I had to go back to school to learn how to learn when I was in my 20s, we have to just enable people to understand how to harness AI so that they can then learn how to use AI for them. And once you've learnt the basics on how to harness it, it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer, whether you're working in a lab or science or academia or whatever, you will be able to then start using it to develop your skills. And once we've got that virtuous circle, I am certain that there'll be a lot more jobs created in the future, jobs for which we don't have a job title for yet. And that's the thing I think that should be exciting, and it will be exciting, providing we're prepared for it.
What do you think a job of the future might be? Like, where do you think Peter Kyle, if he was back in his 20s, going back to studying, would be studying now?
I'm really reticent to say what a job of the future is, because sorry, my throat is going.
That's all right. Don't worry. It's a beautiful podcast.
Thanks.
We're not live.
Thank you. So I'm really reticent to say what jobs, specific jobs that people should be training for in the future. I think I'm right in saying that 60% of the jobs that are in the economy today didn't exist 50 years ago. So if you were 50 years ago and describing what today looks like for most people in most workplaces, I don't think people back then would think what most people are doing now is work. So the nature of work, the characteristics of work, and where sort of income comes from and where corporate wealth is generated, I think is going to evolve. But we will keep up with those changes. And I just think that having the foundational understanding of AI at this point will stand people in very, very good stead for the changes that are coming. And we are doing a lot of very deep thinking on this. My primary anxiety is actually that we get enough infrastructure in our country that data which fuels AI can be processed and retained in Britain. I don't want to get to the point where data is, particularly when it comes to personal data, is flying around the world being processed elsewhere. People won't notice the difference, but there will be a difference in terms of the resilience of our nation. But also, every time that happens on a large scale, it means we're missing out on the economic opportunity of processing data and harnessing it here in the UK. So I want the infrastructure there. And I want us to have
the Middle East is really going after that.
Oh, it is.
Right? Like we're at the moment in third place in our computing power behind the US and China, but we are going to slip, right?
I don't think we're going to slip in that we've got a pathway towards a 20x increase in our sovereign compute capacity by 2030. We've got the AI Growth Zones program, which is going to very rapidly, I mean, there'll be shovels in the ground this year in a lot of communities when it comes to data centers and getting our data infrastructure where it needs to be. We need to have the skills pipeline in place for it, and we need to get the capital landscape sorted, because for pre-seed and seed and sort of the early investment landscape for people who are setting up companies and commercialization is there, but we need the real big investment so that we can get big companies here. I want us to have Britain's first $1 trillion company. I want it to happen in this government. So we need to have these, and there's no reason why we can't. There's no reason why we can't, because innovation is going to come from good use of data, and Britain has the best data in the world. And I'll say this with no hyperbole at all. The British state, if we can safely and anonymously harness the power of the data we have and put it towards scientific understanding and knowledge, and therefore, in the right circumstances, commercialization, then there is no reason why we can't solve some of the great questions that face humanity, unlock incredible medical advancements, I mean really profound medical advancements. Demis Hassabis says that most diseases could be eradicated within 10 years if we use sort of data and AI wisely, for which he won a Nobel Prize last time round. So I think we should listen wisely to people like him, carefully. And if we use these assets that we have which are incredible assets to have in the digital age, we've got the most diverse city in the world, London. Yeah. We've got the most diverse health system in the world, the NHS. So we can have a richness of a human and scientific understanding that no one else can. Now, if we can have the compute power and the data processing facilities here in the UK, then we can harness the fact we've got the top 4 of the top 10 universities in the world. Yeah. We have that golden triangle of the universities and the King's Cross area, where we have a lot of private sector and public sectors like the Crick Institute, scientific and technological companies there. And we can harness all of this and keep the intellectual property and the knowledge that comes from it within Britain. Then why on earth can't we be the centre of the next industrial revolution?
I hope so. I mean, look, I'm with you, and you make a great case. I just worry that we struggle to get companies past 20 billion. Yeah. So when it's like you say $1 trillion, it's like, okay, we're at 50x like that. That's that biggest one. But I do take all that, and I know the government is.
We've got Google DeepMind.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which obviously is Google DeepMind, not just DeepMind. Yeah. And
Demis
we know we've got it in us. Yeah. We know we've got it in us, and that was back then. Now we've got the Crick Institute, and we've got this data. We've got the biobank. We've got Our Future Health. We have an extraordinary set of resources when it comes to what is driving scientific, medicinal, and human understanding right now. We've got to have more confidence, and we have got to, in a more concerted way, bring these constituent parts together, which is why we have Matt Clifford in number 10 now, who did the AI Opportunities Action Plan. He's now heading up the Sovereign AI unit in number 10, reporting to the Prime Minister and myself, so that we can just coordinate these units much more. And also, I've got to tell you, Keir is, that the Prime Minister is, he really gets this.
Yeah, no, Matt has told me how much
he really gets this. And it's a shame more people don't see him when he's really animated. And, when I last sort of had a one-on-one with him to talk about this stuff, he kept saying to me, who do I call to make that happen faster? And I'm saying, we're already probably moving faster than any government in the world when it comes to that particular issue. But surely we can do it even faster if I called someone and I brought someone in and I knocked some heads together. I mean, he's really focused on this. We have this window of opportunity, and we're really trying to grab it with both hands.
Well, I'm sure you can help us put a pitch in for him to come on the show. But I was joking the other day, actually, about... because Emma Jones has been appointed as a small business commissioner. You've got Poppy Gustafsson as Minister for Investment. James Timpson is doing stuff in the MOJ, not economic face, but still an amazing entrepreneur. Matt Clifford in number 10.
Patrick Vallance.
Patrick Vallance as well, Lord Vallance of Balham. And I was just like, they are going to have to leave some entrepreneurs out in the economy. Overall, no, it's great that they're kind of there. What are you using ChatGPT for? Because that's always one of the challenges of government, is that you're busy and you don't have time and space necessarily just to kind of like experiment. So where are you using ChatGPT? And other AI models that may be available.
I had my first submission that came up to me recently, because obviously as a Secretary of State Minister, the completed files that are put in front of you are called submissions, and I had the first one that had written on it, drafted with the assistance of AI, because I'm quite insistent that we start using this technology. In fact, it's not just me. I mean, the civil servants and civil services is hungry for it. So the digital centre that I've created, I explained, is now created within the capacity we have a whole suite of productivity tools, and one of them is Redbox, which is about streamlining the sort of research that goes into submissions. Another one, Consult, which is tackling big public consultations, and it's expediting by a factor, I think, 400% faster than the human analysis, and very good at dealing with bias and other things that creep into the way these consultations are announced. Me personally, I said in another interview some time ago that I used it, that I'd found it very helpful for work, and then somebody did a freedom of information request on my personal chat GPT, and because I had used my personal chat GPT, then it became in scope of freedom of information. So I imagine it's now changed the behaviour of almost every Secretary of State and Minister, I suspect, which is a shame.
But isn't that mad slightly that was allowed to be FOI? Because in the sense of, it's like asking somebody what their Google search history is. I mean, it's just crazy.
It is. It is. The FOI goes back to, I think, 2000. It wasn't in the digital age.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not going to sit here and whinge and whine about this stuff. I could have fought this.
Yeah.
But I chose not to. And because I think actually the way the law is drafted, it technically was in scope.
Yeah.
But I could have probably tried to fight it, and I don't know, there was a small chance I could have won, and actually it probably would have been helpful in some ways to have excluded it. But the fact was that I was using it. What was a shame was I didn't get to explain exactly how I was using it. So when it was released and the headlines came out that I was using it for media advice,
Yeah.
And this is relevant to our conversation, I had my media team my press team from the department, and we were talking about the future projects we were going to announce and communications opportunities we had. And I had commented that there wasn't any podcasts on the list that was in front of me. And so we had a conversation about it, and I said, then, does anyone suggest any podcasts that I should go on? So that's when I went into, in front of everyone, I just said, look, surely there's a way of doing this now. Yeah. So I opened ChatGPT and I put in, I'm Secretary of State for Science, Innovation, Technology. What podcasts do you think I should go on to reach an audience that might be interested in my brief? And then, of course, within seconds, there was a whole set of analysis of podcasts. Some of them I'd heard of, many of them I had never heard of. And so anyway, and I did this a couple of times in a couple of different settings, and the ones that were released were all ones that I had actually used with officials there. It wasn't me sitting at home thinking, how do I get more famous, or how do I wasn't being a sort of like a media tart at home. It was actually all of those ones were actually there. In my life, I use ChatGPT in a way that most people would use it. When I come across something that I don't quite understand or I think is interesting, then I consult it. And the more that you use it, and I use several different products, the more you use them, the more it understands you and your learning and your characteristics, and the more it tailors the learning to you. So it knows my education levels, it knows what I know and don't know about other areas. So when I do ask it about something, the thing I just find it so brilliant at is it's such a great tutor.
Yeah.
And it can really quickly get you from A to B in terms of getting knowledge or getting an understanding of something. And as you would have heard through our conversation, I just find getting knowledge from really satisfying. I love the growth that comes with it, and that has never ever faded in me. And it's why I love this job so much in so many different ways, because I'm always meeting people who come from different backgrounds with different expertise.
It was quite interesting. I asked it to predict your future career earlier, and it tips you for education or deputy prime minister. Now I know as a cabinet minister you won't want to get into all that, so I'm not going to do that. But I wonder why.
I understand with it. So it's a bit obvious, though, isn't it, for education that because I've spoken so much about education in the past and my own pathways through it and my passion for it. I mean, even now in this job, I want I want to use AI to
Talks
help
about
learning.
friendships.
And I want, for people who have barriers to learning, AI can be a great assistant to teachers in classrooms for kids who have different learning characteristics. It can level up in the most fantastic way if it's used well, and we're in the foothills of this. So I would understand why it would say that.
Well, it's just I just found it interesting. What just sort of on the podcast theme and whatever, like how do we kind of protect kind of content creators and so on? I mean, we haven't had people making spoofs of Jimmy yet, but I'm sure that will it will happen in due course and so on. Like, how do we put protections in place for content creators?
Well, we're going to legislate on that, and we have to. And it's been an unfortunate debate recently because I had a consultation on this to try and harness what creators were thinking, where they were on this, and then there was an amendment to an adjacent piece of legislation. It wasn't the legislation, the data bill didn't mention AI or copyright, so we kind of fell into the debate at a point at which I couldn't make the argument in the round on this. So now I'm starting the process of setting some working groups up that will be very rapid, so that I can understand from the AI perspective and from the creative perspective how AI can use and harness the creative sector, because the better access it has to data and creative content, the more accurate the information that's going to come the other side, and the better the models are going to be. But it has to be respecting the rights that the people who create content have to ownership of it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to grapple with the challenges of where remuneration comes from in the digital age,
Yeah.
where the right to exclude yourself from it if you want to, make it easier for licenses, for those people who have representation, for those licenses with AI companies to be delivered, and for a degree of transparency so that people can see how AI models are actually using their content. And those are the areas that I'm trying to reconcile.
Big thanks to Endava, one of the UK's leading technology businesses, for supporting this edition of Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. We are at a pivotal moment as AI begins an all-pervasive shift in human and technology interaction. There are many exciting prospects and also some very important decisions to be made around the guardrails and the right regulation. In the creative industries, Endava are working across the entire ecosystem to develop a platform where our wonderful creators, artists, producers, poets and publishers can ensure that their magic is captured, distributed and most importantly protected and monetized, with the rightful owner being rewarded.
But I also have to be honest that we have to take both sectors forward. We've got the third largest AI market in the world, and we've got the second largest creative market in the world. This is being presented as if it's a problem for our country. There's only one other country that has these two sectors at the very forefront of its economy, and that's America and it's Britain. So both of those sectors are high growth. Both of them are nourishing for humans. They are both global sectors, so to have them is fantastic. So I won't pick and choose between them, but I will find a way to take both of them forward. The creative sector also has a very loud voice, which I think is fantastic, and they are using it very, very wisely. I am a progressive politician. I am a Labour politician, so I will also follow where the need is as well as the voice. The legal profession is going to be upended by AI, and actually in many ways it already is. Some other service sector, because imagine all the research that goes into executing the law and practicing the law. Well, a lot of that research is going to be done by AI now, incredibly accurately, swiftly and cheaply. So the pathways through the legal profession is changing. The same is going to be true for marketing, for architecture, for all these different service sector businesses, sectors for which our country is great. Now, they aren't on national TV having a go at me at the moment, but their sectors are going to be very, very affected by all of this. So I need to reconcile in a very specific way the creative rights into the future. There's an urgency behind it, and I've said that I'm going to legislate in one piece of legislation for AI and for copyright and intellectual property from creators, and I'm going to try and do that as swiftly as I can. But I don't want anyone else that's listening to this thinking that all I'm doing is worrying solely on the creative sector. I'm also thinking very deeply about how other sectors are going to be impacted by this, and how we move forward as a country, being able to harness the benefits of AI, and while we manage the change that comes with it, and that no person and no area, no part of our country can be left behind in the way that they've been left behind in previous waves of industrial change. I just simply, that is one thing that would keep me awake at night if I thought that the decisions I was taking was going to lead to impoverishment of either potential wealth or a community.
Can you see my notes? 'Cause I've got some quick fires to finish off, and one of them was going to be what keeps you up at night. But you've answered that one, right? Which member of the cabinet would you most like you to cook your dinner?
I've had several members of the cabinet to cook me dinner.
Who's the best then? Come on, what's Labour cabinet? Come dine with me.
Wes Streeting does cook a mean roast dinner.
Does he?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
Yeah, Rachel has also cooks a very good dinner, and she recently cooked a nice barbecue.
You've done the spending review now.
No, the most. Yeah. So yeah.
I know Hove has got quite a foodie scene. Where's the best?
Oh my God! You cannot ask me.
Well, just give us an underrated one, or something. Or
okay. I love Rockwater on the Hove seafront, and I played a part in getting it through planning. And Luke Davis, who made it happen, is a hero to me, because he came in to see me, and he told me what my vision was. He told me what his vision was of creating this great sort of open, sort of flexible space on Hove seafront. And I said, if you do this and you stay true to your vision, I'll be there with you right the way through it. And he did it, and it's great. And it is great. Chin Chin at the end of my street in Hove, I love, but one of the best Italians that you will ever experience, and it's cooked right in front of you there in the thing. I love that.
Brilliant. What's the first app you check in the morning?
News.
Yeah. Wearable tech. See, you've got it. What's the best thing about it?
Health.
How do you keep your mental health in check?
Oh, mental health. I've got a great team, and we look out for each other. And this is something that isn't spoken about much, is that we know the pressures that go with my job. I think there's a lot of empathy around me, much more so than people would expect. The system would kill me if it could through work.
Yeah.
The people in it are quite empathetic.
Okay. What car do you drive?
I don't, but I love driving. I gave up my car years and years ago because I felt it was just irresponsible me having a car where I lived in Hove, and my life was between Hove and Brighton, and I didn't really need it. But I'm in the Institute of Advanced Drivers. I love Formula One, and I am thinking of getting a new car. But so I don't want people to think that I'm being I'm too virtuous, because at some point I probably will get
Will you get an electric?
another. 100%. No, and I've wanted to get one for a while, and I lost my dad last year, and I thought we'd have him for longer.
Yeah.
But I thought that would be the thing that makes me get a car, because I could drive along the coast, because it's easy to come between London and Brighton, but using public transport to get along the coast between Brighton and Bognor was a bit more challenging. But I love cars, and I love motoring, and I love the idea of a road trip. But I've only driven once since I've got this job. Okay. It was amazing, though.
Well, since we're talking about electric cars, I'll just mention that this episode is supported by our long-term partners, Octopus Energy. Now, not only have they been shaking up the way that we power our homes with green electricity, but now they've got some brilliant options if you're thinking about switching to an electric car, and how you can power it with solar panels and even heat your home with a heat pump, which makes going electric a lot simpler and more affordable to do. If you're a listener of Jimmy's Jobs and you're considering an electric car, solar panel or a heat pump, then just drop us a line at jimmy@octopus.energy and the team will look after you personally. Actually, speaking of solar, do you have solar panels?
No, but I've taken carbon out of my flat. I live in a flat in a Regency building that was built in the 1820s, and I've lived there since 2000, so I was a student when I got that flat, but I've done it up over time. But I took gas out of it, the job it took to get gas out of it, and then go on to an electric sort of renewable tariff.
Heat pump thing, yeah.
But then I do have access to the roof, and the next stage is to get solar panels on. But I've got the system there where you can just plug the electric straight in It's just I haven't been able to do it yet, and but what I saw it took to get gas out of my flat was an eye opener, because it was a big challenge to get it all out and then get a cleaner version put in. But I do care about this stuff.
What would be your dream job? If not this one?
Oh, God,
like deep sea diver, astronaut. I'm not
Oh, I
trying to
see.
get you to angle for a future leadership thing here.
No, I think the dream moment would be to end your career knowing that you've fully explored every corner of your potential. And I've never known where that is going to take me. I never have. If you've heard my backstory now, if anybody had said to me that I would be doing the next job that I had in my life before I had it, at each stage I probably wouldn't have thought that was likely. Certainly if you took 2 stages, I would have thought it is completely and utterly inconceivable.
What was your immediate thought when Keir asked you to do this as shadow the brief?
I remember the call. He had put me. The first job I had on the front bench was the shadow youth justice and victims. Then it was education schools, shadow schools for a very short time. Then it was shadow Northern Ireland secretary, which was a complete bolt out of the blue. And then when he asked me to do this, it hadn't even flickered across my mind that I would get this job. And I said to him, "You obviously see something that I don't, but I'm going to throw myself into it, and I'm going to become the expert that you need." But what he said was, when we had the conversation a couple of days later, we sat down and had a long chat, and he explained from his perspective why he wanted me in this job, and it was very revealing of how he thinks, and it was very relationship based, and it was very much about enabling. It was a scale of ambition that he wanted for our country and bringing a new facet of our economy to the forefront, and he talked through all of these things, and he'd approached that decision in a way that I don't think many people think you do when it comes to these sorts of decisions, but it was very revealing of Keir.
That's quite interesting. Well, and we've done a thing for the first time on this episode. I had so much fun researching your background and making these cartoons. This is an AI cartoon that I put out to get questions and so on. I've put a few sort of Easter eggs, the kids call it.
I've got a kindly face there, don't I? Does that look like me?
I mean, you look a bit like Mark Carney.
That's actually really true.
That's partly why I made
really
it cartoon, because if you saw the original one, it was even worse.
Really?
It's not very good at, like, it knows who you are, because I've been talking to it for the last 3 days about the interview, etc. But doing pictures, so that's why it's cartoonised. But
it says teaching assistant on the... so AI is obviously obsessed with me in education.
Yeah, well, it thinks you were a teaching assistant. Like, it's kind of like... but it's strange on that. Body Shop bottles.
Oh, that's true.
I thought that,
that is true. I see.
I asked for that, but it did some rather weird versions. A VR headset.
Oh, okay. I've only used the VR headset once. That's great. Can I keep this? Or is this
absolutely. This is for your office. So thank you very much for coming on. You've got a great job. Thanks for being so open.
Thank you.
Really interesting to hear it all.
Great.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me. Cheers.